Why is it said that the European Middle Ages were dark while the Renaissance was bright? Although many scholars still recognize this claim, it is, in fact, a serious historical prejudice. Everything begins with the origin of the word Renaissance. In Italian, the word carries the meaning of rebirth. Now, if there was a rebirth, this implies that before it there was death or emptiness. Therefore, the very choice of the term already carries this connotation. The first to use this word was the famous artist Giorgio Vasari. In his work Lives of the Artists, he described the Renaissance as a rebirth of art and culture. This book mainly compared the art of the Renaissance with that of the Middle Ages. In Vasari's view, Renaissance artists were closer to the classical spirit, that is, the spirit of ancient Greece and Rome. Medieval art, however, had suffered serious restrictions under religious domination. For him, this represented a departure from classical traditions, an insult to art, a mistaken path of development. In addition, we must not forget that Vasari was Italian, lived at the height of the Renaissance culture in his country, and was a disciple of Michelangelo, receiving patronage from the Medici family. In Lives of the Artists, he exalted many artists connected to Michelangelo, portraying them as great cultural heroes, perhaps out of gratitude to Michelangelo or out of patriotism, seeking to glorify Italy's cultural achievements. In any case, Vasari's true motivations can no longer be proven, but his work spread widely at the time, gained great recognition, and exerted strong influence throughout Europe. His ideas became one of the main sources for understanding the Renaissance and the Middle Ages, often being cited even in academic debates. In the centuries that followed, many historians and artists inherited this perspective. Although the Christian faith continued, the Church was already under heavy criticism, and humanism began to attack the authoritarian character of the medieval period. Thus, the Middle Ages came to be portrayed as obscure, bound by religion, with knowledge restricted. But we know that the facts were not quite like that. By the late Middle Ages, universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, Bologna, and Salamanca had already been founded. Highly influential philosophers also emerged. It is true that there was strong cultural control, but calling the Middle Ages the Dark Ages is far too simplistic, almost a total denial of its historical value. Of course, this does not mean that Vasari's work has no value. On the contrary, many of his criticisms of medieval art are verifiable. Indeed, much of medieval artistic production served religious symbolism as a tool to preach to the illiterate and also to reinforce Christian ideology. Art rarely expressed concrete human meanings, being largely limited to praising biblical stories and Christian doctrine. But already at the end of the Middle Ages, we see a clear shift. For example, Michelangelo, although also working for the Church, in his famous painting The Creation of Adam in the Sistine Chapel, exalted the beauty and strength of the human body. Or Leonardo da Vinci, in his celebrated Mona Lisa, whose smile reveals a portrait based on anatomical studies in subtle and realistic detail. These works silently sang of human intelligence and strength, celebrating the dignity and greatness of the human condition. It is as if the ancient proverb echoed in our ears, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me." Follow me, and together we will look at philosophy in a simple and clear way. In the next episode, we will talk about the Renaissance humanist Pico della Mirandola. My friends, see you next time.